video is brought to you by Dusty Vaquero. Punchy, poetic, pure.
Yeah. Some folks out of Casper were writing a kid's book and illustrating a kid's book about Steamboat, the famous bucking horse in Wyoming around the turn of the 20th century, early 1900s. And they asked a bunch of us Wyoming songwriters to write a song about it. And so I did some research, and I knew kind of who he was, you know, but I didn't know much about him. And man, he had quite the life. He was born in one of the outfits of the big, great swan landing cattle in southern Wyoming around Chugwater, around the turn of the century, and just part of the big ranch Remuda, you know, and born out on those plains. And as they did back then, you know, they'd gather those colts when they turned whatever, 2, 3, 4 years old, and those cowboys would break them out there and as using horses, you know, and he had other ideas. And those guys just couldn't get him tamed down. And when they were trying to get him broke, they had him roped, I guess, and he must have flipped over backwards and hit his face and broke the end of his nose, the cartilage on the end of his nose, to where for the rest of his life, every time he'd breathe hard, so when he'd buck, he'd let out this big whistle, you know, so they'd call it like, those guys all thought it sounded like Steamboat. And eventually the ranch sold him down the road. You know, he wasn't going to work as a ranch horse, and this kind of old school rodeo promoter bought him up, and turns out he made a hell of a bucking horse and hauled him all over the world, all over Canada and the US, you know, to these early rodeos, you know, and no one could ever cover him. And he made his way up to Calgary and LA and Madison Square Gardens, and started making quite a name for himself. And then he came back and had a kind of a standing residency, you could say, at Cheyenne and Frontier Days, and this Wyoming cowboy was the first one to ride him. And when he got done, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but when he got done, he had blood running out of his nose and running out of his ears, and he's just like, oh man, you know, it sure didn't seem like I won that fight, you know. And Steamboat was on the road later, a couple years later, and in Salt Lake he had a wreck in the arena and got hurt himself. I don't know, ran a foot through the fence or something, and got blood poisoning. And you know, in those days life was pretty cheap, especially for animals, but those guys thought so much of him that they hauled him back on a train to Cheyenne, and the legend is he's buried somewhere underneath the arena at Cheyenne.
One full moon on Two-Bar Range, legend was born that night. Wild as the wide Wyoming plains, old Steamboat was born to fly. Black as the coal beneath his 3 white feet, king of the hurricane deck. Roared and he'd squeal like a riverboat fiend. Old Steamboat had never met his match. Now listen close, can you hear the whistle blowing in the wind? God only knows if we'll ever hear that whistle blow again. Tell me, friend, old Steamboat is Wyoming, Wyoming is the wind. Charlie was a fast-moving rodeo man, with a soft spot for hard bucking hearts. Queens over 3s in a bunkhouse trade. An old steamboat was bound to be a star. From LA to Alberta, the garden's biggest show, people came from miles around. Bucking was his business, and the cowboys he'd all throw. Not a man could spur a steamboat down. Now listen close, can you hear the whistle blowing in the wind? God only knows if we'll ever hear that whistle blow again. Tell me, friend, old steamboat is wild, wild in his wind. Somewhere in Cheyenne, there's a patch of hallowed ground. The cowboys tip their hat as they ride by. Neath the dirt of the arena where they laid old steamboat down, I reckon that a legend never dies. Now listen close, can you hear the whistle blowing in the wind? God only knows if we'll ever hear that whistle blow again. Tell me, friend, old steamboat